Hello, and welcome to Methley's fine parish church, the Church of St Oswald's. There's been a building on this site for more than 1,000 years, and I'm one of the church wardens, Peter Bloodworth. My fellow church warden, Stuart Davis, is behind the camera, and when Stuart and I normally do tours of the church, it's about the history, the heritage, and the architecture. But this is a different kind of tour. It's a tour to give you an idea of the possible future of this building with improvements to make it more suitable for this century. So if you'd like to come with me, you'll already have gone up 2 steps to get into the porch, and I'd like you to be careful now as you come through and step down into the church proper. As you can imagine, it's not always the friendliest welcome to be saying, "Mind the step," to every visitor that comes through the door. However, let's suggest that perhaps today, being a cold winter's day, a visitor wants to use the toilet, and we're happy to say, yes, we've got a toilet, but it's a bit of a trek, so follow me. And tread carefully, because quite a lot of these tiles are badly worn and there are some little hazards as you walk down the aisle. We're going up into the choir now, 2 more steps to go up. And another before we reach the communion rail. And now we can turn into the vestry, the vicar's office. And there, tucked right in the corner, is our fine Edwardian toilet. We've got facilities, but hardly the most modern. I said that this isn't a history tour, but here is just one example of how this building has been modified down through the centuries. We all know and love this 5-light east window, and you'd think it had been there down the centuries, but in fact that window and most of this part of the chancel was built in 1926. So if you'd come here in the early 1920s, you'd have seen a church with a much smaller 3-light window and a much shorter choir and chancel. Just one example of the way that what we think of as a medieval building is actually the product of many centuries of modification and improvement. Visitors that come to see our heritage are most interested in the Waterton Chapel, with its wonderful gallery of sculptures commemorating the Waterton and the Savile families that own the Methley estate. So going there, we come back down the 2 steps and up a step onto this temporary platform that was put in more than 10 years ago because there are 2 interesting but very worn monuments set in the floor here. And then crossing over, we take up another step to get into the chapel itself and to see the glorious alabaster memorials to the Waterton family and to the Wells family. 2 more steps. Heading back, to nave level, you can see that this south aisle, which was once fully seated by pews, has been cleared in part to make a flexible space where both families can sit and play with their children, and where we have a function in, like the concert that we had last night, we can serve additional refreshments. On a typical Sunday, we can serve teas and coffees from here. So we do have the ability to serve refreshments, but as you can see, it's improvised and difficult to keep tidy and hygienic. For people who need to use a wheelchair or have other disabilities, or for mothers with pushchairs, access through the building is clearly very difficult. And even to get into the building means coming through the north door and down this really very steep ramp. It usually takes more than one family member to make sure that the wheelchair comes down safely. We'd like the beautiful facility, the beautiful features of our church to be accessible to all, but at the moment that's hardly the case. We want to be able to use all the space of our church to the best advantage. And an underused space is the base of the tower. Every Sunday morning the choir gather in here and put their robes on, but otherwise it's pretty much a glory hole and a dead space. But we think we could do more with it. I hope this tour has shown you that whilst there are features of the church which present hazards and difficulties, it's still a building of great potential, and the plan that we want to show you could be a way of opening up that potential for the future. This video is to give you the chance to contribute to a planning process. Finally, approval for any changes we make in the building have to come from a planning authority within the Church of England, and on that diocesan advisory committee are representatives of architectural experts and those who preserve the heritage. They will ask us a question, which is, have you shared your ideas with the parish, with the people who currently or in the future would use the building, and with anybody who has their history, their family history, involved in this building. And this is your chance to be part of that planning process. So I'm going to take you through a presentation which was given to the advisory committee. This is a version of that presentation. We've said that our key needs in improving the building are to make it healthy and safe, hygienic, more hospitable, and more versatile. Versatile means being able to welcome other activities into the building. Here you can see the first of an art show, the Cherry Blossom Festival that we held 3 or 4 years ago. You can see we had a lot of art in, but we had to improvise using pews as places to prop the paintings. We've had bands in playing, but having to squeeze into the south aisle. Or, in this case, using both the chancel steps and the south aisle. And as many of you know, the church will be full to capacity, and perhaps therefore not quite as safe on Christmas Eve when we hold our Christingle services. Just another reason why we need to make sure that access to the building is as smooth as possible. Imagine then if that access was viable through a ramp which led straight into the church, making foot and wheelchair access easy. Imagine how much better it would be for us to welcome you into the building if we didn't have to keep saying, mind the step. The proposal envisages, therefore, that we will have a level run right the way through the porch, and that we will replace the current historic oak door, moving it to one side but leaving it as part of a display, and installing a glass door so that the church will be much more draft-proof as part of our intention to reduce our carbon footprint. You'll also see that there's furniture being introduced here, a welcome station, and displays for historic exhibits, and so on. We can use the space around the font more effectively. As I mentioned, the south aisle has already been cleared, and it's shown here as a family area. We'd like to continue that space and use it in a more versatile way and with better furnishings. Here you see a proposal that will give access into the chancel and chapel part of the church, much easier for wheelchairs and people with disabilities. It's a shallow ramp in 3 stages which leads up onto a new platform or dais. The section in the centre is to represent a glass floor, which we hope will be able to reveal those monuments that are set into the floor. This new platform still involves going up 2 steps, but once you're up that ramp, is on the level with the Waterton Chapel, so no steps are involved. And the platform reaches right the way across the choir area. And you can see there wheelchair access throughout. You can see how it stretches across, and there in the corner you'll see a possible nave altar which could be set up for holding the kind of more intimate communion services that we found ourselves using during the lockdown period. There's the nave altar, but a view of the chancel largely unchanged. It's proposed that the choir pews will be moved back about 1 metre so you can see the additional depth and space of that staging. So in worship, we want our worship to be able to be more adaptable, sometimes taking communion from the high altar, other times more intimate way from that new platform. We want it to be more accessible. It will be possible to get to communion without having to go up so many steps. But we want to make sure that the heritage aspect is preserved in the chancel. Our architect, when he first came up with the proposal, said he hoped that we'd be able to stand between the 2 doors, looking up to the altar and really not be aware of any major change to the heritage look of the building. And we think this proposal will give that. There you can see both the access right up to the high altar, but also the potential, again, of that wider platform leading into the nave. When it comes to community events, we also want the building to be more adaptable, more accessible, and particularly to have a much larger level stage within a more flexible space. And there you see it. We welcome choirs like our village ladies' choir Melodia and brass bands, but they both have to squeeze in to quite a narrow space at the moment. It'd be so much easier. When it comes to going back down the nave, we want to make sure that there's safe access for everybody. And as I mentioned, as we came up, we have some badly worn tiles that need replacing and the floor relaying, but in the heritage style. You can see the figures down there, close to the tower, and there's quite a major change that's envisaged for that part of the church. We'd like to be able to hold exhibitions where currently we have to use improvised methods. This is a display in 2018 showing First World War exhibits. Here an art display, we had difficulty placing it out with all those steps. And here are our friends from the Free Company, a Taunton reenactment group, who love to come, but have difficulty setting out all their exhibits within the building. We've got the tower as a free space to develop, and the idea is that there would be both flexible seating, not pews, but chairs, and even chairs and tables, be able to be used in that space, and refreshments to be served from a kitchen under the tower with a movable server which can be brought out and make it easy and safe for people to receive their teas and coffees and sit down and enjoy them. But to stress, this would be a flexible space, and if we need to have seating for capacity, rows of chairs could be put out throughout the area, and the tables stored away in storage cupboards at the back of the tower. So, if our key needs have been identified to be healthy and safe, then all the efforts to remove steps would be to that end, and a new kitchen would make us much more hygienic, and all of that make it much more hospitable as you enter and use the church, and a space which is much more versatile. But what we'd really like is accessible toilets for all. No more the walk of shame up to the vicar's toilet, but modern facilities within a historic building. And so the third part and most ambitious part of this proposal would be the building of an extension out through the north door, accessed by a more shallow ramp for wheelchair access, and containing both an accessible toilet and a conventional toilet within a light and airy building, again with a glass door to eliminate drafts and plenty of glazing to make sure that the building does not obscure light coming into our beautiful stained glass windows. There you can see our wheelchair user being able to access that entrance on this much more gently shelving ramp. We want to make sure that the extension that's proposed is in keeping with the architecture of the building. Here is the north porch as it is today. Not the most beautiful feature of the church, and one that could be improved, but in a way that is in keeping with the style of the building as a whole. And here's the architect's proposal for a small extension in the Gothic style, but with, as you can see, plenty of glazing. And there, how it would be accessed through the front door. It would sit between those two windows either side of the current north porch, and there you see how it would be in proportion and style in keeping with the church as a whole. Here's the whole proposal. We don't envisage that we'll be able to complete it all at one go. We think of it as 3 stages. The first being the improvement of access through the porch and the changes involved in this, installing the kitchen and changing the potential of the west end of the nave. The second stage would be the changing of the layout of the east end with the much wider platform, the moving of the choir pews. And the third phase, and probably the most expensive and challenging for us, would be the installation of the new extension with the toilets. That whole proposal meets all these needs, and most importantly is one which respects the integrity of this historic building, something which the Diocesan Advisory Committee are going to be very keen to be assured of. But they're also want to be certain that the community has seen and approved it, and this is why we've already spoken to a number of community groups who already use the church, and the reception has been overwhelmingly positive to these ideas. This video is a part of the extension of a further consultation with the wider community, and we would like to hear from you. Please feel free to comment both positively and critically of what we have in mind. And with that feedback, we will be able to go forward to the planning committee for what we hope will be final approval and the ability to start on the first stage of the programme. Thank you for listening. Please let us know what you think.